If the most important character in your story is your protagonist, then the second most important character has to be your antagonist. And that's because the sole purpose of the antagonist is to antagonize the protagonist, to push him to reach for things he wouldn't normally achieve. There's a mouthful. Look at it this way: to antagonize is to provoke, annoy, rile, upset, etc. The antagonist attempts to hinder the protagonist's efforts to reach his goal, and by doing so, helps the protagonist to find an inner strength, allowing him the ability to confront and ultimately defeat that antagonist. Time for another of my little tales. Althea, a teenage girl in her first year of high school, leaves her house each morning with a smile and the confidence to take on the world, but always returns home at the end of the day in tears and despair. While at home, she locks herself away in her room, only coming down for her meals. She is continually saddened, and because of this, she cries herself to sleep each night. But in the morning, prances down to the breakfast table with a large smile and enjoys the morning with her family before eagerly hurrying off to school. She skips along and makes it to her first class, all ready and eager to learn. Then it begins. Leanne and her group of friends approach Althea and assume their mockery of her. As always, they start with her hair, telling her that it's as coarse as a horse's hair. They joke about how large her lips are. Then they talk about the rest of her face and how terribly ugly she has become since the day before. Throughout the day, Althea is subjected to their hurtful words, and by the end of the day, like every other day that came before, she has been convinced that she is the ugliest person anyone has ever seen. But the next morning, when her mother calls her down for breakfast, she is once again her jovial self, ready to take on the challenges of a new day. Today, I'll talk about the bad guy in your story, your antagonist, the character we all love to hate. Then at the end, I'll tell you what has Althea so happy every morning. In fiction, writers love creating antagonists that their readers hate. I'm going to start with a little analogy. You take two relatively equal individuals, same height, weight, age, sex, and perform a little experiment. We'll call one A and the other B. Now, for the next 6 months, you put A through a regimen of training obstacles where he is made to run, jump, swim, climb, and think his way from the start to the end of the timed course as best he can. He does it every day, decreasing his time, achieving a personal best over and over again. By the end, he has brought his time down from 27 minutes to 14 minutes and feeling a great deal better about himself. During that same 6 months, you allow B to sit on a couch and watch his favorite TV shows. He was a little fidgety during the first week at doing no more than sitting and staring at the TV. But by the end of the third week, he was so used to it, he couldn't wait to get back to his favorite shows. By the end, he doesn't want to do much more than sit and stare at the TV. Then, on the first day of the seventh month, you have them switch places. A is sent indoors to watch TV for the day, while B is sent outdoors to run the obstacle course. After a great deal of coaxing, you are able to convince B to run the course. He does, with the assurance that if he tries his best, he will be able to resume his place on the couch and be allowed to continue watching his shows. He actually gives it his best shot, and by the time he had completed the course, he had clocked an embarrassing 51 minutes. He was also so sore, never having used his muscles for 6 months, that he could barely make it back home. During this time, A takes his place on the couch and flips through the channels until he finds something that he thinks he'll like. A couple of minutes later, and he changes to something else. A few minutes later, and he changes to something else. After 20 minutes, he has tried several different channels, but none were able to hold his attention for more than a couple of minutes. He finds himself staring out the window, becoming increasingly agitated at having to sit for so long. Finally, after about an hour, he gives up and goes outside for a run. A, with a body so challenged he found it difficult to complete his day without a continued challenge. He craved the opposition he had grown accustomed to, knowing that without it, he wouldn't have been able to meet the challenge and surpass even his own expectations. B, on the other hand, sitting on the couch unchallenged, he had been spared any physical or mental confrontation. Because he had been allowed to sit unopposed for so long, his body had grown accustomed to an unimpeded existence. The lesson to be had here is an antagonist comes in many different forms, but they all do the same thing. Whether it's a rival character or an obstacle course, the antagonist's job is to force one to excel. But it's not just as simple as offering some opposition. The reason the antagonist's role is so important is because he has to be able to challenge the protagonist at a level where the protagonist stands a chance of being defeated. This means the antagonist must be powerful enough to offer the protagonist adequate conflict. Superman has his Lex Luthor. Where Superman has his strength, Lex Luthor has his high intellect. Dorothy had her Wicked Witch of the West. Where Dorothy has her never ending desire to get home, the witch has her cunning and deceitful ways to prey upon Dorothy's innocence and naivete. Agent Sterling had her Hannibal Lecter. Where Agent Sterling has her devotion to seeing justice done while accepting that she is in some ways out of her league, she knows she is willing to learn. Hannibal Lecter, being extremely intelligent and charismatic, enjoys the concept of teacher student. They were all formidable adversaries and needed to be because if they weren't, the protagonist would have never been able to rise to his or her potential. Example B had no antagonist and therefore sat unchallenged for weeks on end. If, however, someone kept hiding the remote, for instance, his challenge would be to find the remote control before he could resume his TV viewing. If each day the remote control was hidden in a more difficult place than the day before, B would have to become more creative in locating it. And by doing so, the one hiding the remote, being the antagonist, would have helped B become more than he would have been if the antagonist had never intervened. A story with no antagonist is a story without direction, and since the protagonist is the story, it is safe to say that without an antagonist, your main character will probably wander about aimlessly, most likely giving up before reaching his intended goal. The antagonist's role is to provide conflict for the protagonist. Without it, your main character becomes stagnant, which in turn brings your story to a halt. Do you remember the story of the tortoise and the hare? They agree to race to see who can make it to the finish line first. It seems obvious that the hare will win because, well, when has a slow moving tortoise ever come close to outrunning a hare? It just so happens, in this story, the hare loses. I'm not really giving much away because it's not the fact that the hare loses, but the reason why he loses. First of all, it's important to note that the tortoise is the protagonist and the hare is the antagonist. But this story is a little different because the hare is also the protagonist, but is also his own antagonist. The hare, filled with confidence, knowing he can outrun the tortoise, sets about to provoke, annoy, and rile the tortoise. But the tortoise, because the hare, being a formidable adversary, finds within himself a strength he would never have before realized. The hare, being an adversarial character, served to drive the tortoise to persevere where he might otherwise have given up. The hare, on the other hand, with the tortoise offering him no noticeable opposition, he faltered in his convictions, and as a result, his overconfidence was his own undoing. In the end, although he was clearly the faster competitor, unlike the tortoise who took his opponent seriously, the hare lost the race. This is a good example of the importance of the antagonist because it explains why the hare lost and the tortoise won. The tortoise won because he had a very powerful adversary, the hare. Without him, he would have never have been put in the position to strive for more than he thought he was capable of. But the hare, with only himself for an adversary, and not a very good one at that, simply didn't feel the need to step out of his comfort zone and strive for more than he was used to, bringing about his own demise. If the antagonist that you choose isn't powerful enough to adequately challenge your protagonist, then your protagonist will have to rely on himself for the necessary struggle to discover that hidden drive that only conflict can bring out. A good antagonist is that type of character that can perform this task best. Now, where the hare is a terrible antagonist for himself, the character Norman Bates from Psycho, who is both the protagonist as well as the antagonist, plays both characters amazingly. It could possibly be because Norman, the main character, doesn't realize that he is also the secondary character, the antagonist. Because he has a personality disorder, he is in constant conflict with himself. On one hand, a young man just trying to be a good son and run a family business. On the other hand, he is a sadistic killer with mummy issues who is in a constant battle with himself for control of his actions. To have a powerful protagonist, you need an appropriately powerful antagonist. The more powerful your protagonist becomes, the more powerful your antagonist needs to be. It's a marriage of conflict. Now, notice I didn't say a marriage of good and evil because, as I've stated in the past, a protagonist isn't always a hero and doesn't have to be good. He just needs to be the opposite of the antagonist, which means that if your protagonist works from the side of bad, then your antagonist must work from the side of good. They have to be on opposite sides to be able to create that necessary conflict between them that propels your protagonist forward. In the classic novel Moby Dick, the white whale is the antagonist, while Ahab is the protagonist. Here, Moby Dick, the antagonist, is good, which means that Ahab, the protagonist, must be bad. Ahab's desire is to kill the largest white whale he has ever known. It is a trophy that becomes the point of his revenge that he will go to great lengths to secure, even if it has him working from the side of bad. Moby Dick, on the other hand, is merely trying to elude capture and stay alive. His attack on the ship chasing him was in retaliation for Ahab's relentless pursuit of him. Even when the whale is pushed to extremes and finally fights back, he is still working from the side of good. A good trick to practice is this: create the best main character that you possibly can. Then, create the one true character that has the best chance of defeating your main character. You will then have your ideal antagonist. And now I'll tell you the ending of the story I call Beauty in the Eye of the Beholder. It turns out Leanne happened to be the most popular girl in school and had held that title for the past 2 years. All the boys wanted to date her because she was also the most beautiful, and all the girls hung on her every word because they wanted to be as popular. But the year Althea began attending that high school, it quickly became evident that Leanne was beginning to lose the attention of the boys and some of the admiration of the girls. It was after realizing that it would just be a matter of time before Althea would become the most popular girl in the school, Leanne came up with a devious plan. She would convince all of the kids in the school that Althea wasn't the beauty that they all thought she was, but instead so ugly, to get too close to her would only result in having some of that ugliness rub off on them. So, by the end of each school day, after constantly hearing that she was ugly, Althea would return home in tears, believing herself that she indeed was the ugliest person in the school. But in her bedroom, she had a full-length mirror given to her by her grandmother. And each morning, after she woke, while the sun was streaming in through her bedroom window, she would stare into her mirror, and after seeing herself, saw the very thing that Leanne saw and was so afraid of, the most beautiful girl that she had ever seen. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.